Well, well, well. Buonasera, amici. Here we all are, not on YouTube live stream, but in the very bosom of Zoom itself. Who would have thought that after 60 Q&As, Zoom would finally let me down and prevent streaming to YouTube? This is a first, and ladies and gentlemen, you can be sure that I'll be letting them know all about it tomorrow. So I do apologize for the delay in proceedings, but we couldn't even stream to Facebook Live, which was going to be another first. So isn't technology a wonderful thing? So just some logistics before I introduce tonight's moderator and musical guest of honor. Obviously, to go ahead with the show tonight, we've let you all into Zoom. I've kept you all muted with your cameras off. Thank you very much for cooperating. This means that the recording of this event, we are recording right now, will not have lots of funny little Muppet Show faces all over the place, and we will be able to maintain some semblance of professionalism. I have to confess to being extraordinarily embarrassed at the stream failure, even though, as John Cusack said in Grosse Pointe Blank after murdering somebody, it's not my fault. Because earlier tonight, Fabrice, our guest, said he'd been watching our Q&As and impressed at how professional they are. I'm not sure what he thinks now. I guess we'll find out. Anyway, logistics, if you have a question for Fabrice, let's just do it how we normally do it in YouTube. Send me a private message. Try to keep it to questions only, but someone's already said hello to me, and hello right back. Nice to see you also. And if you want to chat amongst yourselves, feel free, but I don't know why you would want to do that given we have Fabrice Lecomte with us tonight. So if he's still there and hasn't, indignantly gone and started his whiskey already because of my bad Italian and the aforementioned stream failure, it is my great pleasure to now introduce one of our most experienced FYC campaigners, Tim Grieving. Hi, Tim.
Thank you, Mark, and welcome to our very exclusive Zoom room, which are usually VIP only, but you're all VIPs today. And we are going to roll with the punches, as we do. But it's a great honor to be here, a great honor to discuss this film score with you, and so happy to introduce our distinguished, honored guest, composer Fabrice Lecomte. Welcome, Fabrice.
Hi, Tim. Hi, Mark. Thank you for the wonderful introduction. I'm so thrilled to be here.
Thank you for adapting to the circus of tonight's Zoom-tacular.
It's still going to be a lot of fun.
It will be. It's really nice to meet you, and I think I speak for many of us that this is our first time to meet you. You're not an overly familiar name. I know you've scored films other than Sylvie's Love, but I went to your IMDb, and we all know that's extremely accurate, but it only lists one other film from 1986, but I know you've done a lot more than that. I mean, can you talk a little bit about your film scoring career to date?
Well, my film scoring career is not terribly extensive. I did some minor short films, and I did this movie that you know of called Honor Thy Father in '84, which actually IMDb listed as a TV movie, but it was a full feature movie. And it was an American-Italian co-production. It was a story, sort of a thriller based on the Palio of Siena. And it actually included a lot of old actors, famous actors, Capucine, Rossano Brazzi, Donald Pleasance, Vincent Gardenia, and a bunch of current Italian actors, mostly theater actors. And it went well for a while, and it went to DVD. And thank God I'm still getting a little bit of royalties here and there. But after that, I got involved with building one of the first home recording studios at the time of, the early 70s and and studios built around that with the computer that is the master, and all the slaves with all the synthesizers, and it was fun. And for a while I was doing some commercials and I was doing some documentaries, but my main thing has always been actually concert music. So you know, you probably, it's not listed on IMDb, but I have done several concerts in New York City. Premieres of pieces of mine were performed at Ellis Tally Hall by the American Symphony Orchestra and at Carnegie Recital Hall. So mostly I was doing that. And even though I had graduated from Mannes College, and also I took several years of courses in film music, I mostly was concentrating on concert work. And later on, after I did the score in Italy, I was invited to conduct seminars in the Scuola di Alto Perfezionamento in Saluzzo, which is outside Turin. And it's for postgraduate composition students that want to get involved in film scores. And I did that for a few years, but it's an old world compared to what's going on right now, as you know. I mean, we were still dealing with moviolas and Steinbeck machines and mathematical formulas to convert minutes into feet and frames and all things that now are taken care by our beloved computers. So, but it was fun for a while, and that certainly got me interested to get back in when the right project arrived. And just per chance, on a chance meeting of Eugene Ash, the movie director of Sylvia's Love, we started talking about movies and soundtracks, and we hit it off really well. And he showed me a script, and there the thing started, actually.
Okay, an interesting route to today.
Yes.
When was that? Was that several years ago that you had that conversation?
Yes, it was several years ago, and it was a chance meeting at a wedding of a cousin of mine who's an actress, the same as Eugene's wife. And there we walks in, and we immediately became friends, and we started talking about our love for jazz and passion for jazz. And he confessed that he was writing the script, and we discussed what we liked, and eventually months later, he sent me the first draft of the script, and I was completely hooked. I mean, that script is so beautiful, and it gives all of the wonderful feelings that you see in the movie. And so we started talking about it, and he told me, you know, what I would like to approach it in a way that, you know, whoever does the music should actually write the music for the jazz group, for the Dickie Brewster quartet, as a record that would have been coming out at the time. So as you know, at the time, the jazz players, great jazz players, would just work on their material, go in the studio, 2 takes, and then they are out. And you know, and we tried to do exactly the same thing. So I wrote several numbers that then eventually used in the movie, asked me to write them as whole pieces. And he didn't know yet what portions he was going to use, but he wanted as whole pieces, and he was going to refer to them later on in the script. So there are a lot of inner jokes between Eugene and I on this film. One of them is that, as you could see from the movie, Dickie Brewster was sort of the friend foe of Robert, and he was the pianist. And Eugene asked me to write specifically the music for the jazz quartet from the point of view of the pianist versus the one from a tenor sax player, which was a very interesting take, actually. And so his name was Dickie Brewster. So we decided to call them, and he was egomaniacal. So we decided to call each of the tunes B dot something else. So it would be B for Brewster, B loved, B bop, B blue. And when I told Eugene, he loved the idea, and he said, you know what, we're going to call the album B-Sides. And actually, he quotes that in the middle of the script when he talks, when Eva Longoria goes to the party and approaches Robert, she mentions how well the record is doing on Variety, which was actually a lot of fun.
That's amazing. It's so cool to be involved that early in the process and to be that, you know, integral to the creation of the film.
it was fun. And also I must say they were wonderful because they got me wonderful musicians to perform my music. I mean, we had Mark Turner and Yuri Kane and Matt Penman and Ben Porofsky. They are all wonderful musicians, and they really did it in 2 takes. I was really, really amazed at how perfectly they got the mood that we were looking for. And once Eugene had the jazz music, then eventually he told me, you know, I like this, and I like you to do the rest of the music, and I like you to. First, there were some indications that are, to my experience, very unusual nowadays. One of them being that all of the music has to be melodic and singable. It should be based on one of the tunes, the jazz tunes that eventually is going to become the main theme for the movie. And the tune ended up being Beloved, which also later on became the end credit song with Cécile McLaurin-Salvant. At that point, he told me I like a lot of strings, and I like the music to be melodic. So it was a lot of fun because growing up in Italy and in France with you know all of this, Piero Piccioni and Rizzo Ortolani and all of these great Italian composers that unfortunately didn't become as famous as Ennio Morricone, but wrote beautiful music. And also some of Georges Delerue and some of those other French composers that locally were very melodic, and their instrumentation was very passionate. And I thought that that's a lot of fun, and I'd love to tackle this project. So when eventually we got to the point where he shot the movie a couple of years later, and after discussing all of the revisions, we were in close contact throughout all this time. After discussing the revision, it was a matter of coming up with a solution. So they definitely didn't want any electronic music. They wanted to have just an orchestra, a large orchestra with lots of strings. So what I decided to do is to work on a palette and avoid any brass. So we would just use double woodwinds with an extra piccolo in a couple of tunes, and bass clarinet at the large part, and English horn at the large part. We have 3 French horns and piano, harp, a lot of tiny percussions, glockenspiel and celesta, harp and strings. And as you can see, the way it was devised, since the first part of the movie, it's very serendipitous. Everything is very nice and it's very fresh. And then eventually you get darker when you get towards the breakup scene. So we started off with a lot of bells, a lot of ringing sounds, and a lot of very, very high-pitched instruments and very happy music. And eventually when you hit the breakup scene, you have just a solo cello playing with a background of a piano doing a figured bass and just strings. So there was a lot of that thinking, you know, was important, I think, to get the sound that we wanted. But it was a lot of fun, and they got us wonderful players, and I really enjoyed it a lot.
Yeah, I want to dig into the score itself a little bit more,
Yep.
but just staying on the jazz, your earliest contributions, how familiar were you with the kind of late 50s New York jazz sound and world?
When I grew up in Milan, I had an uncle who was very often coming to New York for work, and he would bring me all the records and the latest jazz records. And we're talking about late 60s. And, you know, some of them were from earlier. And so I was very familiar, and my 2 favorite kinds of music are classical music and jazz. So I was always a big fan. And my father was also a huge fan of jazz. There was always music playing in our house. And so by the time I was 14, 15, I was listening. I had already listened to a lot of jazz, and I was very much actually into Ornette Coleman and Cecil Taylor and Steve Lacy and Albert Ayler, you know, the free jazz movement. And I've always been interested mostly in the bop bebop, post-bebop, and all the way to free jazz. And so I had played some jazz in Milan earlier on. I had a trio and performed at the Capolinia. And then when I came to New York to study at Mannes, I had a little group and we were playing here and there when I was still playing the piano. Now I don't do anymore. And so I've always been very interested in what was going on in jazz. And I've always followed it a lot. Plus with my father, who was a wonderful writer, there is actually a very funny story, because one night when I was 12, I think, or 13 in Milan, he walked into my room and he told me, "You're not going to school tomorrow." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "Because you're coming with me. They just opened the Blue Note in Milan and Johnny Griffin is playing with Dexter Gordon." So I remember I was so thrilled that he, that he took me there. And of course there were no problems with kids that age staying up late in those venues. But I got to hear them. I got to hear Bill Evans. I got to hear wonderful, wonderful jazz players. And when I finally, my dream came true and I moved to New York, I was every night at the Village Vanguard when Bill Evans was playing, sitting a couple of seats on his back. Wow. And this is an incredible city. I mean, this is incredible country. This is your music, and is the most beautiful thing in the world to be witnessing it live.
Yeah. So you'd obviously been surrounded by it, playing it. Had you written music like the jazz pieces that you wrote for the film prior to this?
Yes, I did. I did some, but nothing in this particular style. They were a little bit more contemporary. Okay. So it was fun to write in this style, and of course I try to get back to listen to a lot of John Coltrane, and especially his ballads, and Dexter Gordon, and a lot of Sonny Rollins, of course, and a lot of the great tenor players of the time, since the character Robert was supposed to be this incredible new voice, very, very big talent, and not only technically, but also somebody who would bring in some new elements to the jazz of the time. I wanted to make sure that I would show it a little bit.
And did you go to set or get to see them record these pieces at all?
I was there.
Okay.
I was there during the recording, and we were working out. I showed them the arrangement. We worked out the various takes, the 2 takes that we worked on, and they were very, very helpful. They made great comments, and it was a pleasure to work with them. It was really good.
So coming back to the score,
yeah.
You said Eugene wanted something melodic.
Yes.
And he is a former recording artist, R&B artist himself, and yes, a film composer. I think he's scored a film maybe. But what was what was his vision for the score that he wanted for the film, more than what you already said?
First of all, as you said, it's a very important point that finally, which is something that doesn't happen too often, you are dealing with a movie director that speaks your language. So there are not too many problems of communications there. And he was a Sony artist, a platinum album Sony artist, and he had a great funk pop group that he sang in, formed by his cousins, and they were called the Funky Poets, and they had a lot of success. And later on, he sold some music to Michael Jackson for the movie Free Willy. But he's he's very knowledgeable with the history of films, and he knows everything about even the most obscure European movies. And it was a lot of fun to talk to him about them. And he said, "I want something different. I want something, nowadays." I believe, and then he agreed in part, is that a lot of the music in the movies, maybe because of the way movies are edited, there is very little room to breathe. And there is, most of the scores are very percussive. And so on purpose, we try to stay away from that. and we try to have phrases that would, have a chance to develop and breathe, and not be stifled in the narration. And also thanks to Dana Compton, the film editors, I think we managed to do some of that. I wish some of the scenes were a little bit longer so that I could stretch. Most of the cues are less than 2 minutes. I wish they were a little bit longer, but I think they were still fairly effective. And I must give praise to Eugene for taking care of all of the needle drops. Even in the script, he had already a perfect idea of what he wanted to give a sense of the time where the movie was happening. And so what was left for me to do was basically just to underscore the moods and the sentiments, and leave the rest of the happy stuff to the needle drops.
Yeah, I mean, it is, there's so many songs throughout the soundtrack. It kind of, to me, it felt like a New York American Graffiti or something just of the era, with, songs playing on the radio or in the background or whatever. And your score then has to work around that or fit into that world. And a lot of times it felt like it reminded me of, the kind of arrangements you might hear on a pop record or a jazz record of the day. Were you conceiving of that at all?
Thank you. I tried to work hard on that, especially the two tunes actually. One is the Lucy Wolper show, the cooking show, and Eugene wanted me to do something bubbly and lively in the style of the shows of the period. So I went back and I researched that a little bit, and actually that has the biggest orchestration of them all, with all of the bells, the percussions, the piccolos and everything. And he liked it. As a matter of fact, they used it 3 times in the movie. So that was a lot of extensive work on that one. And the other one was the song, Beloved, the song at the end with the lyrics of Cecile. And so the arrangements there, the string arrangements, I tried to do something that I would imagine would be in the style of my American composers' heroes, Harry Mancini or Quincy Jones or Johnny Mandel. And hopefully I went a little close to their wonderful masterpieces. I would be very happy that it had a little bit of that effect.
But the score itself, it feels like it belongs in the world of the story, this kind of vintage, retro, nostalgic world. And to me, a lot of it has this sort of dreamy, kind of nostalgic feeling to it. What was the general emotion you were trying to convey with the score?
Exactly what you said. You just nailed it. It's the dreamy thing. With all of these horrible things happening in the world, there you have a wonderful love story. And you just... it may sound anachronistic almost nowadays, and so it is maybe just a fantasy. It's maybe just a dream. So let's keep the dream going, and let's help it with the music, and just let's stay for 2 hours in that nice state of trance. That bring us back good sentiments and good feelings. Before we hit reality again.
You're also helping these transitions of the 5-year or the different kind of time periods that the film takes place in. The music sort of, smooths out those transitions. It seems like that was a function of the score.
Thank you. Eugene made that clear that he needed it. And then when we did the spotting, that was one of the things that we decided to do. Also because, as you said before, he had already his mind very set on the other music, on the needle drops. So my function was to help a little bit the transition. That was something that that needed to be worked out, and I hope that we achieved our goal. I'm very happy with it, and hopefully something. In more movies of this genre will come out. I think we need more love movies nowadays, and there are not too many out.
No, I'll take it.
Yes.
I liked your quote, your use of the Brahms lullaby in the scene where Sylvia puts her daughter to bed.
Thank you. I knew you would be the only one who would bring it up. There was, it was another one of the inner jokes, because you've got actually the Brahms as an accompaniment, and you've got Rockabye Baby right on top of it. So it's a double lullaby. Da 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 dee da da. It's basically that. While you have the other one as an accompaniment. So if the baby is not going to fall asleep with those two, I don't
Double lullaby.
Yeah.
You talk about these cues being relatively short, but you have these, nice solo moments for all these different instruments. You hear them so clearly. So even within this kind of short, frame, you have room for virtuosity and room to kind of spotlight different soloists, which is not that common in modern film scores.
Thank you. Yeah, there was something coming from my classical training, but to me, it is a lot of fun to write music that the musicians enjoy playing and to have their own moment of spotlight. I think it's very important. They appreciate that, and I think it adds to the variety of the sounds after a while. Otherwise, it sounds all, it might risk to sound all the same. But yeah, so that was something that was planned at some point. Yeah.
And you recorded here in Los Angeles?
We recorded in Los Angeles the cues with Suzy Katayama, the wonderful conductor, doing a great job on it. And we recorded at the Sony studios, and there was a huge hall, and it was fantastic. And the orchestras, they were members of the LA Philharmonic and then the LA Chambers Players. And then we went back to New York, and a few weeks later, we recorded the song first with Cecile's trio, and then we did the sweetenings 2 days later here in New York with some members of the New York Philharmonic and the Met Opera. And both size orchestras in LA and in New York were around 45 to 48 musicians, which is fairly big for what is ultimately a low budget movie. So, I'm really thanking the producers for, believing in me and giving me such great musicians and at my disposal to be able to do a good job. Of course, nowadays it's not the same as, I remember reading a wonderful quote from Johnny Mandel saying, I decided to get out of film music when it became mandatory that the composer would have to hear the score you were writing for their movies in a computerized form. And I didn't want to have to deal with the mock-ups and all those things. And to tell you the truth, not being somebody who's terribly technical and somebody who's still writing with a pencil and a piece of paper, for me, that was one of the most difficult things, just to, since I don't use a sequencer, I don't use Performer or Logic, I just use Finale to print out my music. So I bought some sounds from some of these libraries, and I tried to, once I entered the score in it, to just adapt it and send it to the producers. And remember, there were some problems because I know what a bassoon sounds like and the different registers, but they just heard this sort of buzzy sound. And they were like, well, can you change that instrument? It sounds terrible. It was like, look, it's a solo. It's going to be really nice once you hear it with the real instruments. So I think that's the most difficult thing right now, is to be believed when you deal with those things.
Yeah. But you wrote all this on a pencil and paper?
Yeah.
And you orchestrated the whole score yourself, right?
Yes, exactly. Because I remember many years ago when I met Ennio Morricone in Rome and I recorded in his recording studio, he mentioned to me, remember, you have to insist to do your own orchestration because it's an integral part of composing. So, was in a very lucky situation here that there was no time constraint where you have to have everything ready in 2 weeks, and therefore you have to give it, pass it on to orchestrators. And I enjoyed very much working on the orchestration on this, and I so much appreciate your comments that you enjoyed the solo parts.
Yeah, Morricone was adamant about orchestration being, an enormous part of the compositional process. So, but
Yeah,
I'm sure many of our contemporary composers look at this situation, and it probably does sound like a fairy tale to be able to write all this out on paper and orchestrate it yourself. And it feels like the way it was made in another time, maybe a happier time.
maybe it helped in the style, maybe had I done it with a sequencer, it would have sounded differently. And if you actually want to laugh, this was throughout the entire movie. The score approach was very low tech, because it's just me. I don't have an office with IT guys, with people that work the computers. So as I was having problems importing the videos, they were just basically sending me the clips from production with the SMPTE codes, the same clip with their templates, with the music, the temp music that they wanted to suggest, and with no music at all. And I would sit at my piano. I would play the part with no music, and just play over it, and then write the music. And if there was any hit, I would just pull out an old chronograph and just try to catch it on the fly with that. And then when that was done, I would just do the mock-up and send it back, and we would check that it would hit it at the right spot. So, which is very low tech, and I think it worked well for this movie. It's certainly not going to work with something that is busier. But the only inconvenience of this is that by working with a pair of headphones, not to keep everybody awake in the house, most of the time, since I couldn't stop the video in the middle to get the hit, I would have to go back to the beginning every single time. And some of the cues I actually saw 200 times in order to be able to do this. So it's very low tech.
Great. It fits the world of the film.
Thank you.
At one point in the film, a character tells our protagonist, Robert, that jazz ain't cool anymore.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that? Is that true?
Well, my feeling is that the jazz is forever. And I remember an old quote of one of my idols, Quincy Jones: "Jazz is telling the truth about yourself." And there is no time for stopping that. Actually, now we need it more than ever. So I listen to jazz every day. Actually, to me, it's therapeutic. What doesn't matter what I write, what I'm working on, but I listen to jazz. And actually, when I'm upset, strangely enough, I listen to free jazz, and it calms me down. So I mean, there is so much variety, and there are so many incredible talents around that it's I cannot live without it, actually. And I hope that the young generations will learn not to forget that.
Yeah, I think films like this that really celebrate, the beauty of jazz, the musicianship and the talent and the feeling of jazz can do a lot to, evangelize or turn people on to the art form. So
I hope
the side effects of this film.
Yeah, I hope that that's one of the side effects of the film. I'm just actually right now reading John Adams' autobiography, and I was really happy to see how much he values jazz and how much he had followed it, and the importance that he gives it to the history of music. And how he points out the incredible dexterity of these musicians, the adaptability, the technique, their virtuosity, and it's a lot of fun, and it's great to be able to work in both environments because of the different attitude One of them is more like camaraderie, and it's like, you know, they pat you on the shoulders and you joke around and you work things out and you try to improvise. And the other one is great too, where you have incredible professionals doing exactly what you thought you had heard in your head. And, you know, and it's maybe a little bit more conservative approach to it, but it's got an elegance too. And music, however it's done, it's always a joy to see it happen, I think.
Yeah, I agree. Can we expect more film scores from you?
I'm here. I hope. I would love that. I would love that. And especially if they ask me to write something where the instruments can sing, and versus, because I hear a lot of movie directors nowadays specifically ask the composers not to write any melodies. They don't want any. They find them distracting, or they find it interfering with the movie. And I'm sure that there are many cases where it is true. I just hope it is not the trend.
I think it's been the trend for a while, but I see little flowers popping up here and there to show that there's a hunger for it again. So I think, you know, with the right director and the right genre, melody is making a comeback.
Good. I hope so. That would be great. And you are such an incredible scholar. I was reading about you when you were a kid, and you said that you were very much into John Williams and conducting all of his scores. And I think it's fantastic. Sounds good.
Speaking of someone we wouldn't have without jazz, John Williams.
Yeah, exactly. And somebody also who writes with a pencil and paper.
That's right. We need more of you.
Yeah. That's
well, I think that runs the course of what we should talk about. So thanks everyone for being flexible with the Zoom situation. Thank you, Fabrice, for giving us so much of your time tonight.
Thank you, Tim. I really enjoyed it, and I really appreciate the time you've given me.